Now we're going to take a look at some of the systems in our legal system. Now we have three attorneys, obviously. We're going to have three separate issues. We're going to do one with each one. And I'll start off with an op-ed that somebody else may have seen in today's Times here, pointing out that there are not enough public defenders, especially in some of the more rural states in this country. And the ones that we have sometimes leave quite a bit to be desired. Jimmy, to this end, they talked about loan forgiveness. They talked about helping out here for kids so they won't be overburdened with debt when they come out. But a quid pro quo that they've got to help out in the public defender system. What about that? Do you think there should be, I know there's some form of public service that's attached when you go to law school, community service or something else. Should you basically, I think it'll make for a better attorney that somebody's got to work in this, or do you think you can't tell somebody what to do when they go to law school?
You know, first of all, just the stats in the op-ed were amazing. 102 countries polled. We're 65th, tied with Botswana, Pakistan, and Uzbekistan for accessibility and affordability. Look, this is an issue of public funding, and it is an issue of debt forgiveness, and it's an issue of we need to stop being so short-sighted, because by funding these programs, we will save money, because we spend mountains of money on pro se litigants who don't know what they're doing trying to navigate through the system. There are, death penalty cases in the Midwest where you have lawyers who have never done a criminal case, let alone a death penalty case. It's absolutely right. Many issues. You've got students who are graduating with 6 figures in debt that need to make money. And then you've got underfunded programs and not enough programs for this kind of service.
Before we run out of time, you've been on both sides. Used to be a prosecutor, obviously a defense attorney. Is it better to have more 25-year-old kids out of law school, don't really know, one end of the briefcase from the other at this point here, trying to figure this out on the fly? Or is it better to more subsidize public defenders that have the experience that can stay longer? And maybe give them, paralegals or whatever else that they need here to give them a fighting chance. If you're going to spend the money, how would you spend it most efficiently?
Every lawyer is 25, 26 for the most part when they graduate. You become a prosecutor, they throw you into court. You go to legal aid, they throw you into court. What we need is to fund programs where you have good mentors who are experienced that can train these kids in these fields. And with good mentors and good supervisors, these people are going to be getting adequate and good representation. If the case is more complicated, somebody with more experience is assigned. They don't give a first-year legal aid attorney a homicide case.
Okay. This next one's for you, Mayo, and it has to do with an issue we've talked about quite a bit on this program, and that is the bail system. And New York City Council is working to reform it. This comes obviously just days after Khalif Browder killed himself following a 3-year stint on Rikers Island. Again, the guy was in solitary most of the time. He was kept there simply because he couldn't make a $3,000 bail bill. Now, the bail plan calls for income verification to make sure defendants can afford bail, limiting bail based on income parameters, and expanding supervised release programs. Do you think it's fair that Mark can make bail, but Jimmy can't? Yeah, I know. This is a hypo. But Mark can make bail. He has a wherewithal, so he's got to go in his pocket. Jimmy can't, so that Jimmy gets basically, you go home, don't worry about it, and we'll check up on you?
No, bail should not be a ransom. Okay, bail ought to be something, it's a mechanism to ensure that people can get back and forth to court, that you're not going to be a flight risk, that you're going to do what the court suggests you do, you're going to come back, deal with your case in a legally appropriate way. It should be no more than that. It shouldn't, in some cases, there should be no bail. In light misdemeanors where nobody's been injured, you should be releasing your own recognizance. If you show the court that you're not responsible enough to come back, that's a different story. If you're a person who's a special needs person and maybe you need some assistance, they have pretrial services which will contact you and make sure that you're aware of the date to get there. But it should not be a situation where because you don't have the money, you end up serving a jail sentence. It hurts us all. We spend hundreds of thousands of dollars per person. We spend $4,000 a month in homeless shelters for people who don't have housing. I mean, if you think about how we could use that money, that's the money that funds the program Jim was talking about earlier. And that's the money that allows the defenders to have well-funded and well-staffed offices.
And as we talked about, if people didn't see last week here, it is stunning. It's not always the worst of the worst guys that are sitting in there waiting for trial. these are people who can't make bail for misdemeanors. And in some cases, they could go home if they just pled guilty, and they said they didn't do it. They didn't steal a backpack, which is what this young man did. And then 3 years later, he kills himself.
Rich, sometimes
because he never had his day in court.
Sometimes these are homeless people who see that the weather's turning and it's going to be winter. So we pay $100 grand for them to sit in jail instead of having actual jobs and housing.
Okay, next one. This one's from Mark. Trial of James Holmes continues. You remember this guy admitted to killing 12 people in Aurora, Colorado, in a movie theater back in 2012. He's pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. Judge booted 3 jurors because they were discussing news reports about the crime. And Mark, we've talked about insanity, non-insanity, and all the rest. But the question I have is different. Are we delusional as peers here that when a jury is impaneled and they're not sequestered, of course they're going to look at the TV. Of course they're going to watch the news. How much are they really manipulated one way or the other by multimedia and public reaction or neighbors' comments and the rest?
Well, I can tell you that I sat on a jury in Manhattan in a criminal case. Why I was selected to be on that jury,
interesting. Yes.
And I looked up the jury instructions on the internet, contrary to my oath, because I wanted to know what was going on in the case. Because I'm that kind of guy. I think it's
I hope it was 5 years ago.
2 weeks
well,
ago.
he was acquitted without any doing from me. I think it's a legal fiction that we engage in, particularly now, and this goes back to what we were talking about with the changing notions of privacy. The internet is a different animal from just, first of all, I don't think anybody truly ignored press coverage of cases before, particularly in high-profile cases. Is it really misconduct for them to be reading newspapers, reading the internet? They're disregarding their instructions. You'd think that they would be smarter about it than to engage in premature deliberations. Should we sequester more of them or just be more
I think adult and assume it's going on?
I think you should assume it's going on. In a high-profile case like this, you're not, in a long trial like this, if you add sequestration to it, you're never going to select a panel of jurors unless they're complete shut-ins, which isn't the worst thing for a defense lawyer or people who want to get on the case. But it's going to make jury service almost impossible. It's really a flawed system, but the continental model is flawed too, so it's a lesser evil situation.
All right, we come back. 2 stories that everybody was talking about, whether it's in the law or otherwise, frankly. The latest on Rachel Dolezal, the white woman who keeps saying she's black, and also those 2 escaped inmates still on the loose from that upstate New York prison. I got some legal questions about both the cases.